Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Well, President Trump has gotten into a tiff with the president of Colombia. The president of Colombia discovered that the U.S. military was transporting Colombian citizens as part of President Trump's deportation plan back to Colombia, and learned that they weren't being treated very nicely, that they were handcuffed and weren't permitted to go to the bathroom, apparently, which is not too surprising. I mean, when you're dealing with the military is not accustomed to dealing with migrants. They're accustomed to dealing with prisoners of war. And so the president of Colombia said, no, you're not going to treat our citizens as subhumans. You're going to treat them with dignity and respect. You may deport them, but you're going to treat them kindly and with respect. And while Trump went into a hissy fit, and he immediately said, I'm going to slap Colombia with a 25% tariff, and I'm going to increase that to 50% if they don't immediately let my military planes in there carrying these citizens, regardless. And so the president of Colombia responded that he's going to increase tariffs on American goods, 25%, 50% also. But what's fascinating about this is that both presidents apparently wield this power. Well, certainly Trump does. I mean, remember, a tariff is a tax. That's all it is, a tax, a sales tax on imported goods. And it's a tax on American citizens. That it's like when you go into a store and you buy something, you pay a sales tax on it. Well, this is just buying something from Colombia, like coffee or flowers. That's another big thing that they export to the United States. You're going to pay a sales tax. So we live in a country where the ruler has the omnipotent power to levy taxes whenever he wants. I mean, it's just fascinating. Ordinarily, you would think that the Congress passes the laws that establishes the taxes. Not in the United States. In the United States, the president wields the power to set whatever taxes he wants here, at least with respect to these sales taxes on foreign goods. And so he says, I'm going to slap this 25% tax on the American people directed toward the goods and services that are being sold from Colombia. And I can only assume that the president of Colombia wields the same authority. In Latin America, they've always had this saying of that we have the freedom to elect our dictator every 4 years or every 6 years or so. In other words, whoever they elect wields dictatorial powers. So I don't know in Colombia whether he needed to get legislative approval or not to retaliate. But regardless, it turns out that President Colombia discovered that discretion was the better part of valor. It's a very poor country. And what's interesting also is that the two countries have been allied in the war on drugs for decades. They've worked closely together trying to win the war on drugs. I mean, that's what that series Narcos on Netflix is all about, which I highly recommend. You know, destroying the cartels in Colombia and other parts of South America. But, you know, they destroy one and they're quickly replaced by others. So it's a feudal war that's been going on for decades, much like the immigration control system. And so here Trump is punishing the president of this country, and well, the people of the country who are exporting the goods to the United States. But in any event, this guy has surrendered. He says, okay, I'll accept the military planes. He realized that the United States can tolerate a tariff that he's putting on 25 or 50%. We're a big country. In other words, we can survive without Colombian coffee or flowers, but Colombia would have a very difficult time. So Trump's threat is a very effective threat when you're dealing with a relatively poor country versus a very, very relatively wealthy country. But one of the things that we've got to focus in on here is the military, because Trump is clearly deploying the military, the U.S. military, to do what he wants to do, which is essentially seal the border. And this is a phenomenal development. Now, Trump has sent troops to the border before, and so did Biden. But I think then they numbered in the low thousands, 1,000, 1,500, something like that. Trump, according to the news media, is planning on starting out with 20,000 troops to the border. Now let me tell you something about a military society. Okay, it is the exact opposite of a free society. And that's important to us here at FFF, at the Future of Freedom Foundation, because for 36 years, our mission has been to present the principal case for the free society, to explain what a free society is. We want a free society. And when you have a militarized society, you do not have a free society. And President Eisenhower warned about this in his famous farewell address in 1961. I think it's time for Americans to go back and revisit that, especially people in the borderlands. They're going to be dealing with this militarized society. Eisenhower said that what he called the military-industrial complex, which is just another word for the national security state form of governmental structure that we've lived under since 1947, when they converted the federal government from a limited government republic to a national security state. Eisenhower said this is a grave threat to our rights and liberties of the American people and to our democratic processes. What he was saying is this is a grave threat to freedom. But Americans, maybe they've never heard of that warning. I mean, and all he was doing was echoing the warning of our ancestors. American ancestors, that they hated national security states and vast military industrial complexes, and they hated what they call standing armies, which is what we live under. And what Trump is using the standing army down there to militarize the border. And some of you know that I grew up on the border. I spent more than 30 years there. I know border culture, and I know the police state that exists down there. Okay, I mean, it is a police state, but it's a police state that consists of the Border Patrol, ICE, Homeland Security, DEA, deputy sheriffs. Now you've got a militarized police state that is developing there. And then you've got Trump, and another major development is saying that he's turning the war on drugs into the war on terrorism, because he's decreed that the drug cartels in Mexico are terrorist organizations. Why is that important? Because that enables the military to get involved. You see, the military fights terrorism. The war on terrorism, the post 9/11 big thing where the terrorists and the Muslims and so forth replaced the communists. Remember, the communists were the big bugaboo during the whole Cold War. The Reds are coming. And that was what was used to justify the conversion of the federal government to a national security state, which wields omnipotent powers. I mean, this military that he's sending down there, don't forget, wields the power of assassination, indefinite detention, torture, including against American citizens. The courts have upheld this. And so now you've got the drug war morphed into the war on terrorism, which means the military can now enforce the war on drugs, which they do in Latin America anyway, but they've been precluded from doing so here in the United States under Posse Comitatus. But now with Trump morphing these things, and of course, which would justify him, in his mind, intervening militarily in Mexico, bombing these drug cartels and stuff. I mean, you're seeing a real ramping up here. And if you think that just because you don't live in the borderlands that you're free of this oppression that comes from a military society, I got news for you. I mean, look at North Korea. You see, I think it is possible to seal the border, but look at what cost. I mean, North Korea has sealed its border. I mean, nobody wants to get into North Korea, and if the United States moves in that direction, there's going to be less and less people wanting to come into the United States. But people do want to get out of North Korea, but the border's sealed. So you can seal it both ways. And look at North Korean society. So when they wield the power to seal the border with a militarized police state, it's going to seep into the rest of American society. It's not just going to be limited. So if you think, oh, well, I live in North Dakota, Jacob, you're looking at something that's going to affect the entire country when that kind of power is exercised across the country. Now, there's something else meaningful here about this military intervention that we need to focus on. For 4 years, the Trumpsters and Trump himself have been saying that Biden opened the borders, that Biden had become a libertarian. He favors open borders, Jacob. He's become a libertarian. Biden's a libertarian, Jacob. And I'd have to carefully explain, no, Biden is not an open borders advocate. We libertarians are open borders advocate, at least some of us. And for 36 years, we've maintained open borders, which are simply freedom and free markets and limited government, is the only solution to the ongoing, never-ending, perpetual border crisis. Okay, it's been there all my life. It was there. I lived more than 30 years on the border. I saw the chaos. I saw the crisis, the death, the suffering, everything. Okay, and so it's been there, practically from the beginning when they started enforcing this immigration control system. But it's not that Biden became open borders like they were saying, because I'd say, wait a minute, don't we still have a border patrol? Don't we still have ICE and the DEA and stuff? And, oh yeah, Jacob, one guy actually told me Biden issued an order telling the border patrol to stand down. I mean, just inane stuff, weird stuff. So I sent him a link to an article that just the day before the border patrol had busted some illegal immigrants and ICE had deported other illegal immigrants. And I said, well, these guys haven't gotten the memo. If Trump issued that order, how come they haven't gotten the copy of the order yet? He didn't respond because they come up with these delusions that Trump's open borders. Well, what I would explain to them, no, what you have is a situation where the immigration control system doesn't work. It hasn't worked for my entire life. And so when you see the immigrants coming over, circumventing the enforcement, it's easy to say, oh, open borders. But no, open borders is no enforcement at all. So there's the difference between a system not working and open borders is night and day. So you've got a massive police state along the border that doesn't work. Okay? People circumvent the police state. But at the same time, people have their rights and liberties destroyed with a police state. We all know the police state is the opposite of a free society. So you have a police state that's not working, that the Trumpsters then say, oh, you see, you have open borders. Well, no, you don't have open borders because you have a police state there. A police state's the opposite of open borders. What you have is a police state that's not working to achieve its goal. Well, guess what? Trump is acknowledging that. He's confessing that it was all a ruse, that Biden wasn't enforcing the border. And it simply wasn't working. It was all a ruse the whole time. And how do we know that? Because of Trump's use of the military. The 20,000 troops, and that's just a starter. And so if all it was a problem of enforcement, that Biden wasn't enforcing the system, there would have been no need for the military. All that Trump would have had to do was issue the order saying, Biden's not been enforcing. I order the Border Patrol and ICE and the DEA to enforce the border controls. That's all that would have been necessary. But Trump knows that that's not sufficient. That's why it was always a ruse of this old border. Biden's become a libertarian, open border advocate, and so forth. So his use of the military is an acknowledgement, a confession that the system can't work without the use of the military. Now, will the military accomplish this? Well, they did in North Korea. It's possible, but look at the cost. Now, there's another factor in this. Trump is getting Mexico, threatening Mexico with the same threats that he used against President of Colombia, saying, you need to enforce our system of immigration controls or I'm going to slap you with a 25% tariff that'll go up to 50%. He's saying that to the president of Mexico. Okay, now why is that important? Because it's a confession. It's an acknowledgement that his system of immigration controls and Biden's system, they all have the same allegiance to the same system, doesn't work. You see, it doesn't work in and of itself. It's not a self-contained system that works. Yet when you need the intervention of another country to enforce your system, that means your system isn't working. It's not capable of working because you need the intervention of that foreign country. And he said the same thing with the drug war to the president of Mexico. You better enforce our drug laws by not letting drugs come into the United States, or I'll slap you with this tariff, which is a tax on the American people. So it's like, I'm going to punish you, but at the same time, I'm going to shoot my own citizens in the foot by taxing them on buying goods from Mexico. But again, you see, he's acknowledging it's not a self-contained, self-enforcing system. Here in the United States, it's a system that needs the intervention of a foreign country in the hopes of making it work, which means that he's calling on the Mexican government to accelerate and continue the destruction of the rights and liberties of the Mexican people, like travel, freedom of travel. He's saying you need to do things to stop people from freely traveling to the border and crossing the border. Maybe like building your own wall down there, getting troops along the border on your side in order to make our system work. So you see, it's what I've been saying for 36 years here at FFF. This is a bad system. It doesn't work. Now, okay, that's the utilitarian case. It doesn't work. The moral case is that people have a right to cross borders peacefully. That's a fundamental right. That's a natural right. Now, interestingly enough, most Americans are open borders advocates domestically. Not every American. There's some right-wing libertarians that are at least consistent. They say, well, no, the states should be able to protect their borders too from people in other states. Because imagine somebody from Maryland, I live in Virginia, can freely cross into Virginia. A terrorist, a Muslim, a Catholic, a Jew, a murderer, a robber, a burglar, a drug dealer, an illegal immigrant. I mean, anybody just can freely cross borders in this country. Well, that's what's called open borders. And there are some right-wing libertarians that say, oh, no, this shouldn't happen. It's like that guy that crossed the Texas-Louisiana border. He lived in Texas. He crossed the border and went and killed people in Louisiana. Well, the border control advocates would say, whoa, we need border controls there. The people of Louisiana should have a system there at the border that vets people. Nobody should be able to just cross into Louisiana freely. We need to vet them, control them. But most Americans say, no, they're open border advocates domestically. They just can't get their heads around that the same principle works. It's the only principle that works. I've said this for 36 years here at FFF. The only system that works is freedom and free markets and limited government. That what you have here is a socialist system, which is kind of humorous in a way, because when Trump got into this battle with this president of Colombia, Trump called him a socialist. And the guy says, yeah, I am, because the guy is a socialist, and he's proud to be a socialist. So I guess he thought Trump was complimenting him. But Trump wasn't complimenting him. He was saying he's a socialist. Well, but here's Trump and most other Republicans and Democrats that are favoring Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, farm subsidies. Remember when Trump imposed that trade war with China the last time he was president, and he was bankrupting American farmers who had been selling their crops into China and now no longer could do that because China retaliated, that Trump started giving them welfare, farm subsidies, welfare for farmers. I mean, this is classic socialism. And they don't call it Social Security for nothing. It's Social Security. It originated among German socialists. So here you got all these socialists here in the United States, and Trump calling this guy a socialist. It's just kind of ironic. But you've got this system that, from a moral standpoint, people have a right to cross borders because their conduct is peaceful. From a libertarian standpoint, when you cross a state border, when people cross the border from Maryland into Virginia, they're not violating anybody's rights. Now, they may violate rights after they get here, and they should be prosecuted for that. They're subject to the jurisdiction of Virginia. They commit a murder, they're going to get prosecuted for it. But we don't have a big system of controls there on the Virginia-Maryland border, to keep us safe and so forth. So you've had this bad system that violates rights, for 80, 90, 100 years. But also that brings death and suffering and destruction of liberty. And I've seen it decade after decade. You see, what's ironic about this military thing is you've got Americans who hang on a second, I lost my screensaver went on, so let me. Okay, there we go. So you've got this phenomenon where Americans are convinced they're a free people, right? I mean, this is the indoctrination we get in our public government schools, the Pledge of Allegiance, and people do the Pledge of Allegiance all the way through adulthood till the day they die, you know, at their public events and stuff. They're convinced they live free lives. I mean, you know, oh, thank God I'm an American, Jacob, because at least I know I'm free. And they sing that song by Lee Greenwood, and they're convinced they're free. And I was one of them. I mean, before I discovered libertarianism, I was convinced I was a free person. Why not? I went to public schools. I got indoctrinated. And then I discovered libertarianism, and I realized I achieved a breakthrough. I broke through the indoctrination, and I realized, hey, I want to live the life of a free person. But the problem with Americans is that they cheer the destruction of their own liberty. So a lot of them are clapping about Trump sending troops to the border. You know, it's like, oh, thank you for bringing a militarized society to us, because they're so vested in making this socialist system of immigration controls work. I mean, they've been born and raised in this, and they've seen decade after decade of how dysfunctional this system is, and it's got to work, it's got to work. You see the same phenomenon in the drug war. I mean, drug war is an abominable abomination of the principles of freedom, people's rights. You got a right to ingest whatever you want to ingest in a free society, whether it's alcohol or tobacco or marijuana or whatever, heroin, cocaine. You know, that's one of the essential aspects of living in a free society. But not only that, the drug war has destroyed all of Mexico, and it's brought violence, it's brought cartels, it's brought massive destruction of liberty, asset forfeiture, mandatory minimum sentences. I mean, on and on. But people just cheer every time they, you know, like Trump saying, I'm gonna change the designation of these cartels to terrorist organizations. Yay! Thank you, which means military intervention. Massive surveillance state. We all know what happened after the 9/11 attacks when they got the USA Patriot Act and the telecom scandals and the FISA court nonsense and all this massive surveillance, monitoring people's emails, their telephone calls, the website visits. I mean, and there on the border, you already have a massive surveillance state. I mean, you got towers up there, drones watching people all over, and now they're going to have the military involved in the military mindset, because now we're talking about the war on terrorism applied to the war on drugs, and people, yay, thank you. And you saw this after 9/11, where they were cheering the USA Patriot Act. You know, what a great name, Patriot Act. If you oppose the Patriot Act, which involved warrantless searches, the evisceration of the Fourth Amendment, which is designed to protect the American people from the federal government, including the military and the national security state. And you have people cheering, yay, thank you for eviscerating to keep us safe. And it's always to keep us safe from the Reds or the communists or the Muslims or the illegal immigrants or the drug dealers. It's ironic. We live under the most powerful government in history. Think about that. The most powerful military in history. We've got the most frightened people in the world. Americans are frightened of everything. They're frightened of the Muslims. And I mean, I had a guy a right-winger write me recently saying, they arrested a Russian, and you're going to call for open borders. They arrested this Russian guy there he had something with him, I don't know, pistol or whatever, 2 passports or whatever. And I said, oh my gosh, the Russians are coming. This guy was genuinely afraid that they were going to go and get him. You know, and so you have all these frightened people living in their basements. You know, the illegals are coming to get me. It's an invasion, Jacob. It's an invasion, or the Muslims or the terrorists, and everybody just scared to death of their own shadows. And it was the same thing during the Cold War, which is what they used to justify the conversion of the federal government from a limited government republic to a national security state with omnipotent powers, assassination, torture, indefinite detention, that the Reds were coming. The Russians are coming. The same Russia that's, as soon as they finish with Ukraine, their powerful military is going to come and take over Western Europe and take over Latin America and work their way up through Central America and Mexico. And they're going to take over the United States. The Reds are coming. Look under your bed for a Red. But because fear is the coin of the realm. And now you've got people cheering this. And I've seen this along the border. I lived, over 30 years there on the border. And when I was a kid, there was, for example, no highway checkpoints north of town. You were people going to San Antonio. You just free. I mean, that's what freedom of travel is. And then one day they established this checkpoint up there, which is just surreal. And people cheered, yay, this will stop the illegal immigrant invasion of America because now they can't go up the highway to San Antonio. They're going to have to go through the vetting station there. And so it's like weird. You stop there. You have to show your papers. You have to answer their questions. If you don't, if you say, I live in a free country. I haven't even been to Mexico. I can travel without having to answer any of your questions. They'll drag you out. They'll beat you up. They beat up a pastor in Arizona for doing that. You have to play their game. If they say open to your trunk. But you see, it's like boiling a frog. You all know how to boil a frog. I mean, if you're going to boil a frog, you don't get the water boiling in the pot and throw the frog in because it's so shocking to him that he jumps out. No, you throw the frog into the pot of cold water, and then you slowly start turning up the heat. And he starts thinking, oh, this is getting comfortable, lukewarm, a little bit warmer. Blah, blah. And, well, by the time the thing starts boiling, it's too late. He's done. And that's what they've done with Americans along the border. Highway checkpoint, no big deal, Jacob. Oh, you just have to stop and answer their questions. Are you an American citizen? Open your trunk. No big deal, Jacob. And then they go to roving Border Patrol checkpoints where they stop whoever they want and demand to see papers and everybody, yay, thank you for destroying our freedom, because they don't see it as destruction of freedom because it's the frog. They're just turning up the heat a little bit. So they're thinking, oh, this feels kind of good, a little bit more heat here in South Texas or wherever. And when I was a kid, it wasn't illegal to hire illegal immigrants. We hired them on our farm. We had a farm on the Rio Grande outside Laredo, my hometown, and we hired illegal immigrants. And the Border Patrol could come onto our land whenever it wanted. I mean, this is the police state. They didn't need a search warrant. They just open the gate and move. If we put a lock on our gate, they'd shoot the lock off if we hadn't given them a key. And normally our workers could hide. Sometimes I'd go over there and run with them, But they'd bust them when they could find them. And what good did it do? I mean, did it win the war on immigrants? Did it seal the border? It's never done any good, just like the drug war. It just brings death and suffering and misery to people's lives. So their busting our workers didn't do any good. But it wasn't illegal to hire them. But somebody came up with a bright idea some decade along the line, because the system was never working. Oh, well, let's make it illegal to hire illegal immigrants. Yay, thank you. Never thinking that, well, now the feds are going to be able to put American employers into jail for hiring people. You see, they don't think of it as the destruction of their liberty, of freedom of association, liberty of contract. Say, yay, thank you for doing this. And then, making it a felony to transport illegal immigrants or harbor illegal immigrants, which means renting them a home, renting them an apartment, or caring for them and just giving them food and water. Yay, thank you for making it a felony to do these things. And they've gone after people for doing these kind of things. So you got to be real careful if you ever encounter some immigrants on the highway in the Southwest that are like sick, maybe dying on the side of the road. You give them food and water. You're looking at a criminal prosecution, or you transport them to a hospital. You're in trouble. They will come after you. So people cheering the destruction of their own freedom in this country. I mean, that's what's so sad and so pathetic. But that's what we do here at FFF. We bring people's attention to it, that you're destroying your own free society with these systems, the immigration control system, the drug war system, the welfare state system, the national security state system. It's time to go back and revisit Eisenhower's farewell address, where he talks about the military-industrial complex as the grave threat to the rights and freedoms and the democratic processes of the American people. People in the borderlands that are cheering this, and the rest of the country cheering this militarization of the border, that maybe they've never heard about Ike's speech, or what the founding fathers of this country said about standing armies. That was their term for a massive military-industrial complex, or a deep state, or a national security state. Just Google, founding fathers standing armies, and you can see how they felt about them. They would have never approved this system of immigration controls and the national security state, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA, the massive surveillance state. If the Constitution had called that kind of system into existence, they would never have voted in favor of it. We would still be living under the Articles of Confederation, because they loathed the kind of system that we live under today. So we just keep watching, and we keep bringing people's attention to what's going on, the destruction of their own rights and freedoms. And we do the best we can, and rely and have faith in the power of ideas on liberty to get this country back on the right track, the track toward liberty, peace, prosperity, and harmony with the people of the world. I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and thank you for your support, and thank you for tuning in to Trump Watch.